to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the next item on the agenda, it is introduction. We will start with Commissioner McConkey, please.
You said me?
Yes.
I'm Matt McConkey. I'm a commissioner at large representing all 29 counties. Glad to be here. It's glad to be back in the center of the universe. Some of you knows what that means.
Megan Holbrook, Region 2, Salt Lake Summit, and Tulum.
Wayne Barlow, Region 1, the 6 counties northernmost in Utah.
And my name is Nabi Zanadi from sunny and warm St. George. I can love them today. And I represent 14 counties of the south and southwest Utah. Let's see, you don't have any knowledge, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Carlos serves Executive Director of Utah DOT. Jason.
Jason Davis, UDOT Deputy Director over Engineering and Operations.
Terry Newell, Deputy Director of Planning and Investment.
Heather Barshula.
Rob Clayton, Region 3.
Matt Parker, Region 3. Nathan Peterson, Region 1. Ivan Parlow, Program Finance.
Monty Aldridge, Region 4.
Ben Hewitt, Program Development.
Nathan Lee, Technology and Innovation.
Diane
Diane.
Blair.
Charles Stormont, Right Away. Rob White, Operations Director.
Lisa Miller, Traffic Management Division. Linda Holt, Legislative Services.
Jared Esselman, Director of Aeronautics.
Matt Slaw over there.
Mark Shoup, I'm also on there.
Okay. We also like to recognize our federal partners, Ivan Marrero and Bridget Mandel. Good morning, welcome. For those of the less fortunate one who couldn't attend this meeting, they can view this whole event in our youtube.com/UtahDOT. And I think at this point, Zach, how many people are watching us? Thousands?
Right now.
We also have our partners from UTA, their attendance commissioners that are here. They will have opportunity. We will have opportunity from them. Thank you. Welcome. At this point, let us have we have recognized Senator Adams and also Bob Peterson here with us. So, Senator, would you like to have something to say this morning because you have meetings to attend?
Oh, absolutely. Again, and welcome to Davis County. Commissioner McConkey, it is the center of the universe for a lot of us, so thank you. Thank you for being here, and I appreciate all you do. I can't help but think as I enter this building, what a great staff we have and a great Transportation Commission. It was in this building a few years ago, and Commissioner McConkey, you may have been here, but I know a lot of people were. John Petroff was here, but they had a road in Clearfield, 300 North, the state road, that 2-lane road, houses on each side, almost impossible to expand. It would have taken millions and millions of dollars to buy right away to be able to make that road function. They came up with an idea, maybe they ought to trade that road and have the state actually help with the extension of Highway 193. It took a lot of work to get it done, and again, as I look at what Utah does well, and I think it's Utah meaning the staff and the great directors and the deputy directors and commission, they actually traded those roads. And now when you drive 193, and I do it occasionally because I've got grandkids at the end of it, and I live on the other end of it, but it took about a 30-minute drive down to 10, 15 minutes. It is amazing. And then you have next to it Freeport Center. You look at the advantage it is for economic development. And that happened because of that flexibility and that ability to come out to, like you're doing today, come out to the local areas and look at the needs of the local municipalities and counties and then actually respond to them. So I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank you for all the great things you're doing here. We've got a lot of projects in northern Utah right now. Highway 89, and we've got I-15. Hopefully you notice the backup that happens every day on I-15. I'll remind you that from I think it may be the turnoff to Logan all the way down to Payson, the only segment of I-15 that we're running on the old concrete back in the 1960s is Davis County. So I'll remind you one more time of that and appreciate your attention. I'm really concerned as we develop the West Davis, we develop 89, we add a lane to I-15, that again we're going to have them all come together in Farmington, and I'm really concerned about bringing 2 extra lanes on the West Davis and another lane on 89, and actually more efficient traffic on I-15, and what's going to happen at Farmington. So be thinking of that. I think that's something that we'll be looking at as, I think, a legislative body. We're trying to find as much funding as we can. I've said it many, many times, and we graph it again, but if you graph the legislatures and the state's commitment and the amount of money they spend on infrastructure, and you lay over that graph our economic growth, you can't get a pencil lead between the two. And if we mobility and the ability for people to get around actually allow the economy to expand and allow us to have the great economic development that we have as a great state. Unemployment rates are low, our prosperity is high. One of the statistics I'm most proud of as a state is we're rated not just best for business, but we're rated best for upward mobility. And that's the ability that if you're homeless, you can work here, you can find a way to get into poverty. That may not be great for some of us, but for a homeless person, that's an upward move. If you're in poverty, you can move to a better job. And if you have a better job, you can actually maybe get to a more opportunity, a job with even a better future. And if you're a billionaire, I suppose you can be a 2 billionaire. That upward mobility is what I think what we believe in Utah allows for the great quality of life we have. And we have to, as we see this growth, we have to allow people to move and to be able to have that great opportunity of seeing their grandkids or going and enjoying the great amenities we have with our 5 national parks, or to actually get to work. So I appreciate that. Look forward to the great things we're going to do also with public transit. I'm not going to take forever up here, but I wanted to thank you. And I can feel behind me, I've looked around the room, so many friends here. It's actually really fun for me to come to these meetings because I see so many of you that I've known for so many years, and you're so good friends, and I appreciate the friendship that we have together. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for all you do for us.
I'm going to stay for a couple of minutes and I'll have to leave. Okay?
Bob, we understand you have a new calling, new job, so let's see if you can say something about that.
Thank you. I appreciate a few minutes to be able to visit with you. I do have to leave also because I'm driving Stuart to the airport. I'm his driver. One other thing too, as I stand here again, a year ago, as you were Davis County, I was as mayor of Lake City. Today, I'm a Davis County commissioner, which I take that as an honor to be able to have that position here in the county. One of the things I do have to tell you a quick story on that is that when I moved into my office down at the county, I dropped something under the desk and I climbed underneath it. And as I looked up, I saw carved in the bottom of the drawer, I was here, Danny McConkey. So I want you to know that, it amazes me, I need to write. Bob Stevenson was here too, as far as that goes. So, I just want to cover maybe just 2 quick things. One thing I want to just give a report back to. Some of you may remember, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I came down to Washington County and made a presentation about the importance of the growth and the economics of Lake City, which really talks about all of Davis County. If you remember, I had a bottle of water, and I talked about the bottle of water and the importance of developing and how things can change in that. And I had said that I believe that by improving the interchange there in Lake City, also with the new overpass that was put in there at Midtown, and the things that took place on Antelope Drive, it would drive the economy in Layton up considerably. Well, just to let you know that when I came down, Lake City was doing about $11.3 million in sales tax, which is an absolutely wonderful sum. But they are now this year, I think, budgeting $16.6 million that will come in from sales tax, along with the fact that the latest figures that came out from the state shows Layton City's taxable sales at $1.6 billion, which is up almost $500 million from that time. And this shows you, I think, throughout the state, not just here in Davis County, but shows you throughout the state the importance of transportation. As Senator Adams talked about, the importance of being able to move people. And it is something that shows with what's there. One of the things, this is the second point I wanted to just touch base on, is that a lot of you are aware of what's taking place up at Hill Air Force Base. And as we talk about the base, we have to realize the economic engine that is. And with the GSDB that's coming in and the jobs that are going to be here, it is one of the things that is going to continue, especially in northern Utah, to just expand the economy with what's there, which comes back to the importance of moving people. And we appreciate everything you people do. We want to probably be selfish here in Davis County to say you guys look over us more than you do other people. We appreciate it, but we will not tell anybody else that. Just keep bringing it our way. You got that, Senator? Just keep bringing it our way. So with that, thank you. Appreciate you being here in Davis County. Anything we can do for you, we appreciate you. So thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Safe travels.
It's great being here.
Well, yesterday we had a wonderful tour of the Region 1. Thank you all. It was beautiful. The bus driver was wonderful. He could just go to the roundabout so easily. It's just amazing. And the scenery was beautiful. Of course, Commissioner McConkey reminded us that this place used to be onion fields of Utah. Every place that we did go, we saw the fields. But my wife wasn't happy those fields, green fields, were disappearing.
It was the onion capital of the world.
Is that what it was?
Yep.
I think.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Clearfield City, and purpose of today's presentation, I just want to kind of go through and showcase some of our projects up here in Region 1 that showcase some of the hard work of the men and women of Region 1 with our partners and our stakeholders and our local jurisdictions to help provide projects that will improve mobility and safety. And as the county commissioner said, there is an influx of growth in this area, specifically job growth at Hill Air Force Base, and you'll see today that we do have projects that are currently in the works to address that congestion and future growth. So with that being said, I'd like to talk about two of our major east-west connectors in Davis County, northern Davis County. If you remember on our tour, Antelope Drive being that narrow two-lane section, we currently have a state environmental document that's in the process of being completed at the end of the year, where we're looking to widen that road to a 5-lane section. Along with phase 3 of the SR 193 extension, that will continue a 5-lane section out west to 4000 West. Now the importance of these projects, obviously, they correspond with future interchanges with the West Davis corridor. Now once constructed, these extensions will tie West Davis corridor to our other north-south routes like I-15 and US 89. So we'll have continuous east-west mobility between 89 all the way west out to West Davis corridor. We do appreciate the additional funding that was placed on West Davis corridor, so these projects can be constructed along with that project, and these will be delivered with that project. So thank you. Second, another project, it's more of a program that we have up in the area in Davis County, is the widening of the SR 108 project. And as you see in that typical section, that's a schematic from the approved EIS, which was done a few years back. It provides a 5-lane section, and it also provides a bike lane along the sidewalk with some additional amenities at the intersections to help that congestion out on that west side of Davis County going into Weaver County. Just quickly talk through the projects that are currently on the books, and beginning with the southern one, which is the orange one on the map. If you remember from our commission tour last year, it was under construction, and this is the project where we were actually, through good PI effort and a great CMGC contractor with a great team, we were able to close SR 108 down for a short period of time because we had a Syracuse Junior High and Syracuse Elementary. So once school was out, we were able to close 108 and have it back open prior to school coming back into session. That project is now complete, and we're in that closeout process. The next active project would be the Green Project, the project there in the center, currently funded at $60 million, with the majority of the funds in 2023. However, there's been funds that have been pushed up into 21 and 22, where we will begin design and right-of-way acquisition. the region's plan is to try to deliver this also with that CMGC method so we can look for the best benefit and efficiencies, because this is a difficult section of road to manage traffic of operations during construction, along with a tremendous amount of utility work that needs to happen. And then last is an unfunded section, which is the last section, which would complete SR 108 up to the Hinckley Drive extension. It's currently unfunded with a anticipated cost of about $84 million.
I didn't write my name on the bottom.
Next, the I-15 Express Lane project. We're currently beginning our construction activities on this project. I do promise that additional orange barrels will be delivered out on site on this section of the road. They're currently working at night and doing a lot of preparatory work to begin the widening out there. The scope of this project is to provide an express lane from Hillfield up to the I-84 area up in Weber County, with a tremendous amount of bridge work that needs to happen. As you can see, there are 4 deck replacements with 2 full bridge replacements with some modifications being done to 650 North. This is a 2-year project, and once complete, it will be very similar to the South Davis Mobility Project on I-15, which was completed about 4 or 5 years ago. It will provide great benefit and alleviation of some of that congestion along the corridor. We see great benefit with these types of projects. Another one which is regionally significant for Clearfield City, Sunset, and Roy is the future 1800 North interchange with widening of 1800 North. We do have a completed EIS for the area. Majority of the TIF funding is in the 23-24 range, and we have enough funding for the interchange. The widening going to the west down to 108 is currently unfunded. But I just want to talk about the interchange for a minute, because as you know, this is west of the rail, the U.S. Army Rail Depot, and the U.S. Army and the U.S. Air Force are in those discussions and coordination efforts to try to relocate that facility elsewhere. Once that's relocated, then that gives the department an opportunity to either do a reevaluation or another assessment of this interchange to try to find some efficiencies. Are there other options once that constraint is removed? Can there be some efficiencies gained? And that may also happen with an innovative delivery method. But we're always looking for refinements and efficiencies to some of our concepts. Another project up in Weber County. This was the last project that we went on the tour. This is the 5600 South interchange with widening on 5600 South, also down to SR 108. It's currently funded with $3 million. We're currently in that EA study right now, trying to find a final solution. This is one of the concepts that is gaining traction at the interchange. As you know, this is one of our region's most congested interchanges up here in Region 1, and has substantial backing. I know the bus went through the interchange yesterday at about 3 o'clock, and you could start seeing the backing up even at 3 o'clock, and that wasn't even the morning or the afternoon peak. Very excited about this project and pursuing additional work out there in the future. I wanted to showcase the South Weber area because there's been a lot of discussion about South Weber, and I wanted to talk a little bit about our partnership with South Weber City on our 2 preservation projects that we have in the area. But first, just give you a quick update of the I-84 US 89 interchange. We are finishing that interchange study. We've received a lot of information from a lot of options, and we're currently looking at a potential project to improve the interchange of I-84 and 89 with some possible work at the Skyline Drive intersection. Right now, that conceptual cost is at about $66 million, and it's unfunded. But between now and any future date where the region may pursue additional funding, we'll refine that concept. But that study is in the process of being finished, and we're excited to have some great options up in the area. Back to the preservation job on I-84. If you remember the bus, you probably remember the bumps. I do promise that we will grind the pavement once we're done. There is a reason why those panels right now are high. But we're also going to do a heavy road-to-mill and overlay on SR 60, which goes through Riverdale City and South Weaver. We've entered into some partnerships with South Weaver City on the I-84 project. We are going to assist the city with our contract to work on the Adams Avenue bridge structure, along with them on SR 60 with some curb match projects and some sidewalk projects through South Weaver City. We'll be able to, at that point, look at possible striping changes to help facilitate some better mobility for pedestrians and bikes through the corridor. A great project that was recently awarded and will begin construction this year, and we should have the I-84 section of that concrete pavement done late July. So very excited about those projects. The 24th Street Interchange is another TIF project. It's funded in the 24 year. However, with the recent reset, there has been some money that has been moved up into 21 and 22 and 23. The reason for that is, if you remember driving down Midland Drive, looking at the granary and all that industrial, we have a lot of railroad work that needs to happen. And this is more than just a common type of agreement or interaction with the railroad saying, yes, you have permission to work on our property. We actually have to relocate line. So there'll be some considerable rail line that has to be constructed with that project, and we anticipate that could take 2 to 3 years to happen. And so we're very thankful to have that early funding to begin those discussions with the railroad in that design. Once complete, we'll no longer have a half interchange, but a full interchange at 24th Street. And then last, these are kind of our daily projects that the department does so well. These are pavement preservation jobs. I just wanted to take a minute to showcase some of those other projects, that those other roads are not forgotten. 5600 South in Roy, 1800 North, which is 37, SR 37, SR 107 and SR 110 will all receive pavement type projects this year, where we'll look at improving smoothness and we'll prolong the pavement life. SR 37 and SR 60 have been awarded. From the time that this slide was put together, we have awarded those projects and actually received some very competitive bids. So we're very pleased with that. We're pleased for our pavement dollars and for the opportunity to go out and improve some of our roads in Davis County. So with that being said, I'm sure I've said enough. Is there any questions from the commission?
No, the graphics, by the way, are excellent. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next agenda item is the public comments. So at this time we ask every one of you, any one of you, who would like to say something, would you please come forward, state your name and your capacity that you're serving. Anyone, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Tina Cannon, Morgan County. I would just like to come forward this morning and thank you. I appreciate that the corridor preservation was finished and completely purchased for the Mountain Green half interchange. I think based on what's happening on 24th Street, we may be the final half interchange in existence in Utah before we're done. But I really, really appreciate the work that was done, the time that was taken to look into the project. In listening to Stuart Adams, and I still want to call him Mayor Stevenson instead of Commissioner Stevenson, talking about the economic impact for transportation projects. That's exactly, we have known from the beginning that Mountain Green doesn't count anywhere for population impacts or traffic impacts, and that this project is unique in the economic impact and recreational impact that it has for the region. And I am so grateful that you were able to see that and to put it on your list of projects that needed to come forward. So I just wanted to come in this morning. Sorry I missed the tour yesterday. I know without my comic relief it wasn't nearly as fun as last year, but I do appreciate the time that you take. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Just be brave. There's no cost.
Well, since it's free, I might as well get up there.
Please.
My name's Howard Madsen, I'm Sunset Mayor. Just comment on 1800 North the Interchange. We're very excited about getting it going in 2024. A little concerned about not having the widening of 1800 funded. It's unfathomable to me to build an interchange and then dump that onto a 2-lane road that is already backed up. When the trains come, it is backed up all the way to 89 and down 89. So that bridge is going to be extremely important and valuable to us, but I'd encourage you to be looking at all ways you can to fund those projects so they can be concurrent, get it done so we can get that traffic moving. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Anyone else? Seeing none, we're going to the next item on the agenda, which is the UTA, and we have our friends from UTA commissioners here to tell us and report and update us on the UTA forward.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's interesting to be on this side reporting on UTA as opposed to being where you're sitting, as I had been for so many years. Little did I realize when I was being a little harsh on the UTA people that would come to report that it would be my responsibility to do that very thing with you in the near future. So, but we're glad to be here. Carlton Christensen, our chair, is out of the state this week and so is not able to be here. But I'm accompanied by my colleague Beth Holbrook, who is also one of the trustees that represents actually Davis, Weber, and Box Elder counties. And we will share responsibility in reporting to you here this morning. I want to call to your attention a couple of the items that we have given to each of you that you have in front of you. One is a Federal Priorities and Initiatives brochure that we recently shared with our FTA colleagues in Washington, D.C., giving our perspective of the future of UTA and the needs that we have, the priorities that we have, and the requests that we will be making of the FTA for additional funding. I've also given to you this budget in brief for 2019 that will explain our budget amounts and procedures for this year. So what we want to do now is to give you a report of some of our activities and let you know of the change that's been happening at UTA. I think you're all aware that there's been a fairly major change in the governance. And so I've asked my colleague Beth to begin that process with some explanation.
Thank you, Kent, and good morning, Commissioners. This is my first opportunity to speak before you today, and I am looking forward to doing this. It's been drinking from a fire hose is actually very well stated in this role, and we have been doing exactly that from the moment we started. We started on November 1st, 2018, as required by Senate Bill 136. And I'm going to talk to you about several key areas that were our initial focus of the Board of Trustees as we started in this process. We are going to focus a little bit on the oversight and accountability, the governance, the audit and ethics, and the agency leadership and structure. Oversight and accountability. Within oversight and accountability, the board approved the final 2019 budget as established by the previous board and focused on other key areas, including contract authorizations and expenditure authorities. We reviewed all of the bond policies, the agency investments, and we initiated a new 5-year capital projects plan to be implemented alongside our 2020 budget. The governance. That's kind of the key thing as to what significantly changed in regards to UTA. As you know, we are now set up with very similar to a commission model, with 3 individuals who represent different areas. Kent represents Utah County and Tooele. Carlton Christensen represents Salt Lake County, and I represent Davis, Weber, and Box Elder. We look at these things as our regional responsibilities, also dovetailed with the fact that this is actually an entire region organization, and that's how we also want to look at things and focus. One of the things that we started doing is we initiated weekly public meetings. We meet every Wednesday, and we have dialogue and a regular board agenda, just as you would anticipate for a commission structure. We authorize all of the key actions that the agency does, and we provide a public meeting forum during that time frame for any discussion and direction that the agency is taking. We are including a more robust discussion from all of the departments within UTA, because we want that to become more of the public dialogue. In other words, the why is it that we do what we do, and have that dialogue in a public setting. We also established our new governing bylaws that govern the entire structure as it exists today. And we established the independent authorities for our advisory council, which is nominated and set up to be a separate entity, but yet still within the UTA framework. The individuals on the advisory council are nominated by their respective COGs, and they attend meetings roughly quarterly, although in this initial setup of this governance structure, they have actually had, I think, already 3 meetings, and they're having their 4th one in the next little while. We also focused on the key components of the advisory council is actually looking at and reviewing alongside the trustees. Those 3 things are the transit-oriented development, the capital assets, and the service plan agreements. And those structures have been implemented and reviewed and passed by both the advisory council and the trustees this past March. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the audit and ethics portion. We initiated and launched the UTA Ethics Hotline and formed a new UTA audit committee to make sure that our oversight and our ethics are in line with where we expect a public entity to be.
Who's on the audit committee?
The audit committee, excuse me, sorry. The audit committee comprises of Mayor Troy Walker, Kent Millington, the other trustee Carlton Christensen, myself, and Jeff Aserson. He is the mayor of Linden. The next item on what we're going to discuss is the agency leadership and structure. We've met with Amalgamated Transit Union, and we spent a lot of time initially touring all of the business units within the UTA organization. We toured, so there are 3 main business units, one here in Ogden, one in Salt Lake, and one in Timpanogos, Utah County. We've met with all of our employees that are directly reporting to the next level of directors, which are our chief operating officers. We have a new service planning officer that's due to start shortly, as well as our HR and other internal organization. We feel that one of the key components of meeting with all of these department heads and touring all of these facilities is that the employees are really, really an incredible, valuable asset to UTA, and we want them to understand that we view them as such. And we want their input, and we need to and want to retain them for any future growth that we know that we're going to be experiencing. Right now, we're also in the process of doing our final recruitment of an executive director. We have gone through a process that was established by an independent recruiting firm that was actually based out of another state, who came in and did an analysis of what it is that we were looking for this organization moving forward. Part of the governance structure that we established is basically, in essence, the individuals on the trustees, or the trustees are the outward-facing component of this governance model. The executive director is going to be the individual who is required and going to be working internally to make sure that the operations and then and all the administrative is going to be taken care of, as well as making sure that there is a dialogue between the trustees and the executive director. We hope to have an executive director in place within the next month or so. We feel that that individual is really going to take this organization to the next level. And we feel that with their background and experience, the entire region and the state of Utah are going to benefit as a result of that. In addition to the above items that I've already talked about, I just wanted to mention that we are currently participating in the studies that have been required for UDOT and UTA to evaluate how that would look if that organization, if UTA's organization would be to go under UDOT's structure model, as well as we are looking at the URS study, which is the retirement portion of that. Currently, UTA has a separate retirement structure. One of the last things I want to talk about before I turn it over to Kent is we are actually quite actively engaged in constant stakeholder engagement. We are meeting with our communities that we represent, as well as meeting with communities that we don't technically represent, but recognize the inherent value of understanding the needs of the entire regional organization, and that includes the community stakeholders. We're meeting with cities, county commissions, COGS, any framework and any dialogue that we can do with that. But in addition to that, we're meeting with the individuals. I'm meeting with UDOT people, something that I had not had a previous role in doing, as well as meeting with our legislature and understanding what the needs are when we look at the growth of this of our state. With that, I'm going to turn over the next item to Kent, and he's going to proceed from there.
As Beth has indicated, we're going through this governance change, trying to facilitate the Board of Trustees work with the outside communities and politicians and other organizations such as UDOT, while our internal people, including the executive director, whom we expect to have in place in the next month or so, works specifically inside the organization. Let me explain just a little bit about our local priorities as we work with various cities and counties. We've made a real effort on the part of the trustees to reach out and visit the city councils, the mayors, their meetings, the COG meetings. I was in Tooele last night to their Tooele County COG meeting. We're making an effort to get out and talk to people as much as we possibly can. One of the things that we're doing there is we're looking carefully at the kinds of service that we should be providing as transit authority for the state of Utah. And we're talking to them and getting as much input as we possibly can. Now, one of the big things that's happening with our local changes and the dialogue that has been taking place the last several months is that in August we will have a pretty serious change day. Every year we take August, there's a change occasionally later in October and then again in May, but that's mostly for the ski season. But the big changes come in August, and there will be a fairly significant change this August. For example, in Salt Lake City, the city has come up with additional funding for east-west transportation along 2nd South, 9th South, and 21st South. And so there will be a rather significant change in the bus structure and bus frequency along those routes in Salt Lake County. Utah County is exploding around the Thanksgiving Point area, northern Lehigh. You're well aware of that. So there will be some significant changes between southern Salt Lake County from Draper, taking people by bus into northern Utah County and then servicing that Thanksgiving Point area. These are coming as a result of the outward reach that we've been making the last few months. There will be some changes up here in the northern part of our service area. For example, we're looking very carefully at the Ogden BRT that would run from the Ogden Frontrunner Station up to Weber State and over to McKay-Dee Hospital to facilitate the movement of people in and around those major centers in Ogden. To give you an idea of some of the success that we've had, as we've engaged with UDOT, by the way, in promoting the BRT system down in Utah County. We now call that the UVX, the Utah Valley Express. But UVX got started last August. Since August through the end of April, we have carried 1.8 million riders. We carry just over 10,000 a day on that UVX.
Where's the beginning and end point, Ken?
The beginning is let's start at Provo, the Provo Frontrunner Station, and come up to, it goes through the center of Provo, up around BYU, down to UVU, and to the Orem Frontrunner Station. So it connects the two Frontrunner stations. And as you might anticipate, most of those riders are students, but about 20% of those riders are local people. And so we're seeing very significant traffic as a result. One of the interesting things that's happening is that we are able to track where those students go when they tap on and tap off. We've actually seen a significant ridership in tracks and on buses in Salt Lake County from the students at BYU and UVU, because they're able to get on Frontrunner, UVX to the Frontrunner stations, get up into the Salt Lake County, and then they move around Salt Lake County either on the buses or tracks. We've seen a very significant increase in that kind of transportation between the two counties. So these are some of the things that are coming as a result of our efforts to work with the local communities, the counties, the cities, and coordinating with UDOT in all of this because of the BRT systems. But I thought you should know that the BRT system that was implemented, passed by the commission many years ago, has been very successful in Utah County. And we're looking to duplicate that both in Ogden and again in Salt Lake County.
One of the next things that I'm going to talk about is the public priorities. And again, you're going to hear this repeatedly because we feel so strongly that this is the most valuable component that we can bring to this organization moving forward, and that's the public engagement process. We want to make sure that we are listening and communicating and understanding what the needs are of our respective communities and the community organization as a whole. One of the key things we have focused on doing this year is the service choices study that UTA has established. The service choices is basically a community engagement piece that's online on our website. And what we are doing is asking residents and individuals, whether they ride the bus or not, to give us some feedback. And the dialogue, in part, discusses the ridership portion versus the coverage portion. And part of that is a policy decision that communities are ultimately going to have some level of engagement in. Do you focus on ridership? Do you focus on those main arterial roads or transit, and you put all your resources there? Or do you cover areas that might not be quite as dense, but still have people who are paying taxes just the same as everyone else? That study right now, so right now with no final input yet, right now this area has about 35 to 38% ridership focused. The rest of that is coverage focused. When you look at Davis, Weber, and Box Elder, you can see why that kind of exists. There are large pockets of still rural community, or still at least maybe not quite rural in some areas, but remote enough. That coverage is a factor. When you look at Salt Lake County has about 60% ridership focus and 40% coverage. And that's the same statistics or same percentages in Utah County. Those are the key things that are driving our decision making right now. And our policy portion of this is to ask the communities, what do you want to see? Do you want to see this level of continued ridership focus? As you know, our revenues, we derive about 18% of our revenues from the fares that we have. And that is a dialogue that we have had over back and forth, I think, for years and years. Do we focus on the major areas and put all of our resources there to have the frequency and the length of time of service each day? Do we have weekend service? Do we go past midnight? All of these are questions that we want to have community input on, because that's a policy decision that's going to be coming from that community to us. Or do we focus on coverage? Are we getting to all the people who actually need the services, as well as the people who live in these denser, more urban areas? Last night I was in Layton City and doing this very presentation and having this dialogue. The people are, I think, giving us their perception of, here's what my community wants to do. And they're also talking about, this is what their community is saying. Sometimes those don't always fit. And then when you add the land use component to that, it does create a fun dialogue. Land use is another piece of this service choices study that we want to make sure people are understanding, because when communities are making planning decisions, if they wanted to have an ideal model, we want to establish a grid type format, similar to the way Salt Lake City was initially established. Some communities have that, some do not. And when we are talking about future planning, that's going to be a critical component to having quick access to not only transit, but to work, to homes. How is it that we're going to have our communities look when we know that we are going to have growth as a result of just our general growth, our internal birth rate growth, and our great economy that we have going on today and for the last years? One other thing I wanted to talk about is expanding the public engagement. We really want to make sure that the public understands what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And we're hoping that this study is a good stepping stone to doing that. I have heard from several residents in addition to speaking at city councils, and getting their feedback has been really, really it's engaging to me. I had a woman approach me who talked about the fact that she wanted to understand how we were going to do more service in her area, and what does that look like. And it's not simply just a question of, do we add a bus to this area? It's, how is that going to flow and connect to our major transit zones so that we can move people efficiently in the future?
One of the biggest things that we've had to deal with in the last few months that we've been in place is to reassure the employees that UTA is a functioning entity and is intended to provide the services that we're in. expansion in the southern part of Utah County.
Where is Shaw?
Between Springville and Spanish Fork. It's in that area. Now, we're right now, as you well know, if you're trying to get around in downtown Salt Lake City, we've got the track all torn up on about 4th South and Main Street. We're making this half Grand Union change right there. We're right in the middle of it. It started the first part of May, it runs till the first part of June. And in conjunction with UDOT, we've had to rearrange all the traffic going through downtown. And so there's just a lot of these kinds of projects that we're working on together. There's a lot of interaction between your organization, used to be the organization I was proud to represent, and the organization I am now proud to represent in UTA. We appreciate your consideration. There's lots of work to be done, and we look forward to being able to work with you. Now we open it up for your questions, and I'm starting to tremble already. But please, if you've got any questions, we do have a final summary that we want to give you, a summary document that summarizes all of the things we've done the first quarter of our work together, and we're about to prepare a second quarter very soon, and we'll get that to you. But please, if you've got questions.
Will any of those projects involve improving the service into Logan?
Right now, the answer is we work with the Cache MPO and the transit system up there. We're sharing a lot of information about ridership. We currently don't have exact plans to extend ridership from the Wasatch Front into Logan. But we do work with the transportation system up there, sharing the knowledge that we gain as far as as far as buses and other things. Beth?
Thank you, that's an excellent question. And actually, Box Elder County is just in the final stages of hiring an engineer to do a study to determine the number of people who actually are leaving Cache Valley on a daily basis to head maybe to Ogden or some other location. We wanted to understand what that flow of dynamic of actual day-to-day travel is going to represent. That study will probably be within the next year or so we will update you when that is completed. It's just barely, the person is just, or the corporation is actually just being hired, and that's being coordinated by Box Elder and Cache, and in addition to partnering with UTA on that, because we really need to understand the dynamics of that traffic flow.
Yeah, I've known a number of people who live in Cache Valley and work at Hill Air Force Base, so they commute every day. And that would be something, I don't have any figures, but that'd definitely be something that someone in that situation would be interested in.
Yeah, we would be interested in that as well. You may be interested to know that in our van pool, we have about 470 vans that are hired out all the time. There's about almost 70 of those vans end up at Hill Air Force Base every day. The furthest one is from Malad, Idaho. There are two 15-passenger vans that come from Malad, Idaho to Hill Air Force Base every day. And
high school workers.
Yes. Other questions that you may have?
Oh, I have a couple. So thank you for the presentation. This is an interesting hybrid with 136 that we're all trying to do.
We're trying to figure that out.
Are we going to have terrible sticker shock when you come back with your request for the money?
Probably.
Sitting down. So are you going to have it in your priorities and what you consider the most, or is it a compilation of legislative priorities, your priorities?
It will be a bit of both, but we're working hard to put our priorities in place. Now, when you say sticker shock, are you specifically referring to the TTIF?
Yes.
There won't be that much money in there, so it won't be that big a pot to worry about initially.
Those are two different things. There's a request and then there's the reality. So.
Yes, but the overall project to upgrade Frontrunner, to double track Frontrunner, to electrify Frontrunner, and what we call the future of Frontrunner, is a pretty big number. But if we look at it individually, in small chunks, a little improvement here, a little improvement there, it's not so much heavy sticker shock when we do it in smaller pieces. But we will, over a period of time, just like in trying to improve I-15, we've been at that for a long period of time. We've got to make those same kinds of investments in transit now.
So Ken, are you saying you think front runner's more important than rapid bus transit though?
No, I didn't say that. I just said that front runner is a major spine for our transit system right now. And so the improvement the last 2 or 3 years where transit trains have been speeding too fast to go around a curve, and many people have been killed. As a result of that, the FTA and the FRA have instituted what they call positive train control. That is, with various signals when a train is moving, it will automatically slow down or shut down the train movement. If signal crossings, for example, are not down or malfunctioning, it'll shut the train down. Well, it reverberates through our whole system as a result of that. And so as we look at trying to keep on a good schedule for front runner, we need to double track in a couple of places. Right now they can only pass at the stations. We're looking to be able to allow them to pass each other between stations so that trains can keep moving. However, buses are a precursor to fixed rail. And so as we look at the expansion in southwestern Salt Lake County, or in Utah County, or up here in the northern part of our region, we're looking at expanding our bus services, including the BRT systems, as a precursor to thinking about fixed rail. Fixed rail are expensive, very expensive, and not quite as mobile. Once the track is down, you're on the track.
Right, and I don't mean to go on, but I have been thinking about this, and this is, no offense, but this is a Millington question. So with this, are you going to raise the fares? Ask for the fare raise with the details?
We have begun a fare study, and we're looking at that very carefully. All for the next, I think, 3 or 4 weeks in our Wednesday board meetings, there will be presentations about fares. And so we're undertaking that study right now between now and fall.
I had a feeling that maybe you would.
That maybe I would be involved in looking at fares. That's the reason why I'm interested in the next subject as well, the road user charge.
Thank you. I just kind of wanted to address that a little bit. One of the it actually is quite it's going to be kind of a key piece of what we're planning on doing moving forward. So with UVX, currently that system is free to all of the riders, and that's due to a CMAQ grant. And that CMAQ grant only goes for an additional 2.5 years. So it's originally a 3-year grant. And so we're going to take a look at that, because one of the things that we noticed as a result of running UVX was that it's not just the students that are going to UVU and BYU that are riding this. As Kent mentioned, there are local residents who said, in fact, I think Mary tells a great story. One of our director down in Timpanogos tells a story of running into moms and strollers who said, yeah, we're just going to go over to this park over here and have a picnic. Just a free opportunity to get on, get off, do what they want within the community and get back to where they were. That is definitely going to be part of that free fare or fare discussion as a whole.
Thank you. And I had more, but I'll defer to Tom and other people.
Ken, a follow-up question on this funding that I see is a beautiful brochure. I've never read it all, but on page 5, you address right there on local option sales taxes where the 0.2% sales tax was authorized by the legislature that could be enacted by the local jurisdictions.
Right.
Do you have any sense of when the local communities are going to stand tall and give you that money?
That additional 0.2%?
Yes.
Some are considering it for 2020 and some 2021.
Because it would appear that to expand the services you've been talking about, you're going to need a few more bucks.
We will need some additional funding, no question. In fact, Tooele County just enacted the third quarter, starting last July. And Utah County, the fourth quarter, starting just this year. It starts July 1 of this year.
That's great.
So there's movement on the part of the counties to increase those sales taxes.
Summit County actually is the only county that has enacted the fifth quarter. And that at this point, that's the only county that's done that. But that is an option, and I know that counties are having that dialogue right now.
Well, I can recall when they approached UTA and wanted UTA to come in and bring them service up there, as well as over in Morgan County. We're going to have that someday.
One day, we have one bus right, one town code.
And
it's a start.
It's a start, Tina.
But I just want to compliment you on these two brochures you have. These are really great information. I love it. Thank you so much for this.
Can I have one more question?
Yes.
Thank you. I don't remember in the bill. Do you have another board that is an advisory to you?
Yes, it's an advisory council. Beth briefly mentioned that.
And I haven't gone through
Yes,
it all.
there is an advisory council, and their specific purpose is to look at service options, our budget, capital projects, and the TOD.
Oh, good.
So they oversee, and we have put into place a process for their review and approval prior to our review and approval.
How many people?
9.
Oh, good.
How often do they meet?
Quarterly, by legislation, no less often than quarterly. But getting started, they've already met, I think, 4 times, and the next meeting is coming up in June, so a little faster to get started.
When do you council members attend those meetings?
We do attend, actually, but they are run by, so their chair is Mayor Aitchison from Linden, and then their vice chair is Mayor Walker from Draper. And they actually run that meeting. We are simply in attendance and hearing, whatever feedback and public comment that they receive.
Wow. Thank you. Finally.
Sorry, Nagi, we're taking too much time.
These are beautiful dialogue. We need to know this. It's good to know.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I have one, if you don't mind.
Please.
When are you going to have the transit system between Logan and St. George?
And Logan and St. George?
California just changed, they put the kibosh on some of their high speed. So we'll see how that goes.
We're going after that, all that money that California has foregone.
We can guarantee if you ride the ship, Commissioner Conklin, down the law, and myself, 3 of us definitely will be on it every time.
St. George is, I think, deserving of it.
Well, thank you. Any other questions from public? Anyone? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for allowing us to report.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you. Okay, new item on the agenda is road user charge. I think Nathan Lee is going to be more experienced in this dialogue.
Thank you, Commission. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to present the Transportation Commission's draft rule to the public for the road usage charge. I feel it an honor to present to you today in regards to the rule that you're undertaking. In Commissioner Barlow's honor, I wore my KISS tie today, just in case anybody was wondering. I thought of him and found that in the closet this morning and just thought that's the one that works for today and his thoughts. And we appreciate the service that he has brought the department, representing the commission on the advisory committee for the road usage charge. By way of update in the item, 2 years ago, as one of the items in the Senate Bill 136 that was passed, they implemented a fee for all vehicles of electric types, and that fee is an annual fee. It's incremental over 3 years until it's fully implemented, And it also created the opportunity for a road usage charge in lieu of paying that fee. Following that, in this legislative session, there were changes that needed to be made in order to implement the road usage charge. And some of those changes identified the need for rules. A rule both for the Commission and a rule for the Department of Transportation. Specifically, the rule for the Commission that needed to be addressed was how they would establish the rates for road usage charging. And by legislation, it was decided that that would be the role of the Commission. So today we are presenting the draft rule, the Commission's draft rule regarding the road usage charge, and I'm just going to cover a few of those items on there for the public's benefit and to give the department's recommendation regarding the road usage charging. In section 3, we see that the responsibility for the road usage charge was given to the Commission, and as was asked yesterday at the workshop, the Commission can at their discretion change that rate as you feel is necessary and pertinent. There's a process for doing such, and that's what the next section in the rule addresses, the process. One is that the Commission will consider recommendations that come from the Department of Transportation, as well as the Commission can consider all types of relevant data and information from reliable sources that you might have to determine what you want that rate to be. The rate can be based on a number of different factors. Mathematic formulas may identify and bring certain pieces together to help understand why choices would be made, but ultimately there's a lot of other factors that go into establishing a rate, especially if the rate is desirable to be somewhat of an equivalence to gas tax in how people travel. So I'm going to go over a few items today in regards to what we presented as a Department of Transportation for our recommendation for establishing a rate. First was we looked across the country at what's going on with different types of vehicles that use electric charge rather than gas consumption for the highway funds that normally come through the gas tax. What we find in the two charts that are well, first what we find from the state map that's there is 20 out of 50 states have some type of regular fee for these electric charge type vehicles. And 10 of the states in yellow there are states that are also looking at establishing a regular fee. What you see on the left is the fees that are being set for Utah for these programs. And those fees went into implementation in January of this year, and they're charged by the Department of Motor Vehicles to all vehicle owners, and they will continue to move forward in 2021 where the rate then is set. What you can see from the top graph is that Utah's fee structure is within the range of all of the other states, and in general, the majority of Utah's fee structure is probably on the lower end of the range. Okay, so one thought to think about in establishing the rate was how do we fit across the country? Another thought in establishing the rate was how did they get to $120, say, for an electric vehicle in the first place? Or how did they get to $52 for a plug-in hybrid? The information that's shown here is that all vehicles that are hybrids of some type probably get at least 40 miles to the gallon or better. Plug-ins maybe around 50, and EVs, of course, it doesn't apply. So when you think about what that means, there's two items up there on the top that represent the 30 cents per gallon gas tax that we have. If you tried to get to $120 as an equivalent rate for gas tax, you can see that, as we discussed in the workshop yesterday, the actual average vehicle miles per gallon for all the registered vehicles in the state is about 20 miles per gallon. So of all the vehicles that drive here in the state, that's the actual average. However, these vehicles, they're 40 plus miles per gallon. And so on the far left and the top, you can see that could allow one to drive twice as many miles with a hybrid type vehicle as what the average vehicle in the state is to pay the same amount of gas tax. That means paid in the program and to not overcharge them. And the information that we showed below showed that at 1.5 cents per mile, how those different categories of vehicles would bid. So when we pulled all that together, our recommendation came from these major considerations. First, Utah's fleet of eligible vehicles for the road usage charge program exceeds that statewide miles per gallon, as we saw, 40, 50 versus 20. Second was, there's been a number of other pilots that have done throughout the country. In all of those pilots, they've charged anywhere from 1.5 cents on the bottom end to 2.4 cents on the top end for that road usage charge. For instance, Oregon, the only currently running program, and it's optional program in Oregon, they started at 1.5 cents and they have since increased their fee to 1.7 cents per gallon. Giving that bottom end range and looking at the revenue neutrality that was recommended by the committee depends both on the miles that the car travels and the mile per gallon that the vehicle receives. We had to find a compromise that seemed reasonable to not overcharge, but allowed people to want to enter the program. And one of those compromises came from another recommendation of the committee, and that was to make sure that the total amount for $20. Entering that program, that's the fee they'd have. Based on those elements and based on the feedback that was given yesterday in the workshop by the commission about what you'd like to see in your transportation rule, we have went and updated the rule with the recommendation for the road usage charge rate to be 1.5 cents per mile, effective when the program turns on in January, and that the rate would be indexed to the CPI, just like the gas tax, and that yearly the commission would review the information that's there and consider whether or not they'd like to make changes to the rate. That's the information that we'd like to present as a department regarding the rule, and the time is probably now back to the commission to discuss this rule. Commissioner Barlow, who was on the committee, may want to lead some discussion that you have as a commission. I would be happy to answer any further questions if there are in regards to your draft rule. Thank you, Commissioner.
Any questions from Nathan?
Good report, Nathan.
A lot of work has gone into this to make it sensible and fair.
Is there a place that if we decide that it's not quite enough, that we can just change it, go back and amend it for the fee?
Yes. Yes, at least annually it says in here that you would look at it, but if you look at the first section of the rule, under section 4, it says under section 4.2 that the commission considered, under 3-2 it says the commission may at its sole discretion change the rough rate.
Okay, anytime.
We would hope, based on section 4, that the commission gives recommendations that rate wouldn't change more than annually. That could be a challenge for operations.
I understand. I'm just channeling Kent Millington on this. Thank you.
Nathan, the question I didn't ask yesterday occurs to me today is that the UDOT Commission has a responsibility for this RUC usage value. We don't have to get an endorsement from the legislature. They don't have to act on it. We have the authority to do that as we see fit, based on all the studies that we put with it as we go down this road. Or does it have to go back to the legislature for enactment? This RUC thing. No. Legislature, this is not one of their fingertips on this.
Yeah, the legislation identifies up there in item number 3, directly from the legislation, it says the commission is responsible to set that rate.
Yeah, okay.
And that the rate should be defined in the rule, which is why the last section in your rule says what the rate is. So for you to take an action to change that rate, you would need to change the rule and follow the process that we're starting today in changing a rule.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
Commissioner McConkey asked what Jim Palmer's role is in this. Jim Palmer is our attorney, is representative of the Attorney General's office. So he's our legal counsel that represents us. He works for us. So he provides us legal advice. So this was, this is being presented this morning as information. The schedule that Nathan presented yesterday would indicate that we would come back to the commission for their basically approval of your rule, which would include the rate in the June commission, which would then begin the administrative rulemaking process. Jim Palmer, REG, will help move that through that process.
So maybe the rest of the year to go through that.
Well, and then Nathan and his team will have the rest of the year to get this the process up and running, so that January 1 we can say we've complied with the state law to have the program up and running.
Any other question? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 6, we will have the item railroad with report on FHWA.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mr. Chairman, thank you for having me here today. I just want to start by thanking Lisa and Region 1 for the nice tour we had yesterday. That was nice to see, and it brought back memories. I think before we went to NEPA assignment, I had signed a couple of the environmental documents for some of those projects. It was we could get out there and see them. Thank you. Here it is. Okay, I just have three items for the Commission this morning from the federal side. I want to start off with just making you aware that, little background, the AASHTO policy on geometric design of highways and streets is we call it the Green Book. That is the standard that we use to design our highways on the national highway system. So every so often that document gets updated. So in 2018, AASHTO published a new edition, the 7th edition of that book. So what normally happens is FHW has to go through the rulemaking process to adopt that as our new standard. But as a way to kind of expedite the process, a lot of states have expressed interest in starting to use this new standard. So we issued this memo on May 10th, which basically says that Federal Highways has reviewed the document, the new book, and found that it meets the standards of the 2011 Green Book, and it allows states to start using that standard now to do their design, should they choose to. So it's available for you that if they decide to start using, they want to start using the 2018 Green Book. So the second item for your attention, to follow up on Nate's good presentation on the road usage charge program. You may remember that UTA received a grant in the amount of $1.25 million under our Surface Transportation System Funding Alternatives Grant Program, or STSFA. So one of the requirements of that program is that there be an agreement executed between UDOT and Federal Highways in order to begin utilizing the funds. So that agreement came into our office this week. We reviewed it, and I was able to sign it, I believe, on Wednesday. So the agreement is signed, executed. So the funds are now available to be used for the program. And the final thing for your attention is has to do with the load posting on structures on our transportation network. There are two standards out there that deal with our structure. There's the National Bridge Inspection Standards and the National Tunnel Inspection Standards. And under the NBIS, the one for bridges, there's load posting is required when structures are not rated to carry the load of the vehicles going over them. But there's no time frame from when to load post them. Now, for the tunnel inspection standards do require that tunnels be load posted 30 days after they are rated, that the level rating determines that they need to be load posted. So as a way to kind of bring some uniformity to the program, Federal Highway came up with this memo on April 17th. It basically requires that bridges and tunnels be load posted within 30 days after they are rated, the low rating terms that need to be load posted. So, and as a way to, we know that this is a change, so we've we've made the deadline for implementing this October 1st of 2019. So those are the three items I have for the commission today. I'd be glad to answer any questions. Just don't ask me how you load post a tunnel. I'm sure.
Any questions, Ivan?
So is there much talk about discussion about the infrastructure plans maybe coming up from the Trump administration?
I believe there's a lot of talk going on about that. It seems to be, if I don't know that I can read one of these articles without infrastructure being mentioned right now. It seems to be there's a lot of interest in Congress right now on getting something done for infrastructure. But I would be the wrong person to ask about what's going to happen there.
Or wants to, so hopeful.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan.
Thank you very much.
Item number 7 in the agenda is UDOT scoreboard, and Chris Peterson, Rob White will conduct that particular section.
Excellent, Chairman Zanotti and members of the Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. Give you a quick update on the goings-on of project development and how we're doing in our projects and getting them advertised and built. If you look at the screen, right now we have only 5 past due projects. That number is going down as we move through the course of our spring this year, with only 7 projects anticipated to advertise in the next 60 days, which means we're really doing a great job of getting our work out and getting it there. You'll notice that the total number of projects is 628 is sitting somewhat consistent as we are starting to move forward with a lot of the projects as well that we've approved at Commission, and we'll be looking for the Commission to approve here in a couple months. Then that number will certainly change. Our current advertising performance, we continue to do very well and exceed our goals relative to the number of projects that we're advertising on time at 89%. That's a great number, and we're really pleased that we're able to maintain that performance. Since the first of last month, we've advertised 19 projects totaling just around $125 million. You can see that list of projects right here. There's one project on the list that you'll see that has that red number on it. That's an item that's later on the agenda. And so you'll kind of learn a little bit more about why that project is and why it advertised with that delta between the plan value and the project estimate. So, any questions on that list of projects? Okay, our advertising status, this is representative of what we were just talking about in a tabular format. Over the past year, you can see that we've had some projects advertising late. That still keeps us within the 89% performance. We have 5 projects that are late and will advertise later this year and early next spring. Those are those 5 red ones. And those projects are later than we originally planned, but the project teams have identified how to deliver those, and they've set new dates relative to that. But because we're not meeting our original plan, that's why they're showing up red there. Well, let's see if we can reload this. Oh, I know what. Okay, we're going to go in. It doesn't work very well with Explorer. Okay. So let's navigate to it real quick. Okay. This fiscal year, we've advertised just over $1 billion worth of projects, 147 of those. We're pretty pleased that our project team's been able to manage an 89% target of completion there with over $1 billion worth of projects. That's, I'm always surprised when I see that number. And as we scroll down to this chart with the number of projects that we have underway right now, 180 projects.
That's more than last year. We peaked last year at 178. We still have more to go. So we're adding to that list. Of the $1.7 billion worth of contracts that we have underway, we have $1 billion of those, or just over $1 billion worth of remaining to be paid out on those contracts. So I want to show you on this chart right here, this is the last thing I'll bring up today. If you look at May, and look at May relative to this year to last year, our contractor payments are much lower this year. And if it will stop raining, we will see that number go up. But many of our projects are having some challenges this year with getting a lot of their work done because of the wet spring that we're seeing. I expect you'll see a June graph that'll be much bigger. June traditionally gets a lot drier, and we'll see some of that work happen. But we'll watch that as we present to you in the next couple of months to see how that changes. To respect you on time, and our agenda is still long today. Do you have any questions? If not, I will defer to Rob.
Thank you.
Quite a difference between May this year and May last year.
Yes. Weather.
What weather?
It's weather. It's rain.
The weather?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that has been bad weather.
Yeah, there's several projects that you should be driving through and seeing orange barrels on as you go home today, depending on which direction you're going to go. So a lot of those have just been held back just a little bit because of that rain, and I'm confident in June you'll see that number go back up, and the project teams will be working to get back on schedule.
Yeah, a lot of good pavement in 89 through Logan Canyon.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, Commissioners. It's good to be with you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to be here today. I'm going to report today on some of the results of Chris's projects. We're going to talk about specifically two things, the zero fatalities, or the goal that we have, but also I'm going to talk a little bit about mobility and some of what the results of what we've done over the past many years with our projects. And let me go back to Okay, well, let's talk zero fatalities first. Our index currently sits at 79.5. And if you look, you can see several of our performance measures we're not meeting our target on, but about half of them we are. Talk first about fatalities, which is our traffic fatalities. The target, of course, is to reduce that fatality number by 2.5% below the 3-year average. We are currently sitting at 77 for the year. We've unfortunately had another one last night on US 6, but currently our fatality target is 83, and we're at 77, so we're trending below our current target. Serious traffic injuries, we're also meeting our target on that. We have currently 134, and our target is 150, so we're doing well on that. If we look over at our internal injury rate of our folks, our employees here in the department, we hit a spike back early this year, but we're also trending down on that. You'll notice that the goal moves with the amount of hours that are worked, and so our goal is to achieve less than 4.29 injuries per 200,000 working hours. Traffic crashes, this is one area where we're not currently meeting our goal. Our target is just around 9,000, almost 10,000, and our current, that's our actual crashes, and our target is 8249, so we're not meeting there. Some of that has to do, we believe, with the number of storms we had this year has contributed to that. And then our equipment damage, as we saw in previous months, peaked back in January, February, but it's currently trending down. We're seeing that fewer and fewer pieces of equipment damage is happening. Let me go back quickly to our optimized mobility. Make sure this is the right one.
And I wanted to show you something because we've updated our data here. If you look, this is our delay numbers. And in the past, since we didn't have sensors on many of our facilities, we used the data from I-15 only in Salt Lake County. Recently, with the purchase of our crowdsourced data, which we call our HERE data, we have been able to put that everywhere throughout the state on our major roadways. And if you look at the trend from going back to January of 17 to today, you can see that trend line coming down significantly. And we attribute that as I-15 goes, the state goes as far as delay. Most of the lion's share of delay in our state happens on Interstate 15 mostly throughout the Wasatch Front, but also some in St. George. But as you see, the projects that we've completed over the past 5 years or so, you see that number, that delay actually coming down. And so that is an encouraging thing to see, that we are the projects that we're doing are making a difference to the lives of the people of Utah, and they're not having to sit as long in traffic because of the projects that we've done recently over the past year. To dig out. But overall, we're pretty encouraged by what it's showing us.
Thank you, Rob.
Okay, thank you.
Item number 8 is the consent agenda. It consists of approval of minutes and 2019 schedule amendment number 8. So I would like to entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. So motion and second, any further discussion on those? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Approve the consent agenda. Ivan Harbour, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Jumping in, getting started, just one quick reminder on the consent agenda, at the bottom of the portion of the consent agenda, it does go through and show the current fund balances, and just point that out for anybody wondering where to find our current program balances are. Jumping into item 9A1, I-84, I-15 North Split Bridge Preservation Project is a funding addition request for 2 different fund types, $400,000 for transportation solutions and $2 million for the state bridge. The location of this shown here on the map, running west of Tremont. The original scope of this project was to keep the traffic on bridges while the repair work was in process. As the project start date is nearing, another inspection of the project has occurred. It is noted that bridge decks have deteriorated more than was anticipated in the original scoping and estimate of this project. It is determined that additional hydro demolitions are needed on these structures, instead of the original scoped repair techniques. The additional hydrodemolitions also change the plans for the maintenance of traffic during the construction, and the increased costs associated with this additional hydrodemolitions and maintenance traffic is increasing the project estimate by $2.4 million. As a little bit more information, there are 11 bridges, 11 structures on this project. Originally, 2 of them were scoped with hydrodemolitions, and we've added 8 more hydrodemolitions, right? 8 more hydrodemolitions on to be done through these on this project. So that is the numbers of the change of the scope.
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second on item number 9(1)A. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's approved.
Thank you. Item 9A2 is Jeremy Ranch Road improvement. It's a funding addition. A request also for 2 funding types. Summit County, $2 million, and the Transportation Solutions from Region 2, $450,000. We do have Derek Radke here available if we have any questions on this project. Reviewing the location, the justification. At the time of the advertisement of the project, the county requested to reduce the timeline from 2 construction seasons, which is what was used during the estimate, to a single construction season. The concern was that during construction there was not an adequate stopping point to wait out the winter. The Jeremy Ranch Elementary School is close to this intersection, and the county desired to minimize the impacts of driving in winter conditions for the students and the other traveling public that uses this intersection. The bids that were recently opened have come in 27% higher than the engineer's estimate. Through the federal aid agreement, the county is committed to provide the additional funds, and via an agreement with the region will add $450,000 of their region transportation solutions funds, and the county will provide the additional $2 million to award this project. That being said, our request is to add the $2,450,000 to the Jeremy Ranch Frontage Road Improvement Project.
Move to approve as stated.
Yeah, and I'd second with the fact that it's good to have the Summit County join in with this.
So there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 2 is approved.
Thank you. Moving into Region 3, item 9A3 is a Provo Canyon wall repair. This is a new project to the STIP that would be added to the STIP for $250,000 with the Transportation Solutions. It is up Provo Canyon on US 189. During the spring, a section of the MSE wall that supports US 189 in Provo Canyon has lost the top few rows of blocks. Previous observations have been recorded that this particular section of the wall is not holding up as well as other segments. During an inspection of the area, it was determined that there is no geogrid present from the original installation of the wall. This project is needed to install the geogrid and rebuild this portion of the wall. Also included on this item is an exhibit, an inspection report, a project report, showing some better detail, the picture of the location, as well as the section that shows the top few walls.
That says it all.
Can you explain the term geogrid? Is that soil nails?
That's Chris Peterson address that.
A geogrid is there's several different types of materials they'll use, but it's like a polyester or
Chris,
a...
why don't you start with what an MSE wall is, because the geogrid is needed to construct this.
Okay, so an MSE wall is a mechanically stabilized earth wall. So a lot of times with a retaining wall, several different types of design. How an MSE wall works is you basically create a great big block of soil mass, and so the soil retains itself with reinforcement internal to the soil. And in this case, we are using a geogrid. Sometimes we'll use steel strips or steel rotted grids that we'll put back in the soil basically to reinforce the soil with itself. So a geogrid is a polyester. It's a fiber plastic type material that will lay back in the soil in horizontal layers as you build the wall up. The blocks on the front are simply there to keep the soil from falling out from between the grids. And so in this case, with the lack of or the failure of the geogrid, they need to go back in and retain that. So it's a certain style. Sometimes we use concrete retaining walls for a retaining wall. There's several different types, but this is one that's relatively inexpensive to build and actually survives really well in the environments that we place it in.
Thank you, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, but is 250 enough? This looks like a pretty...
Well, they're not going to have to rebuild the entire wall. What they'll do is they'll take it down as far as they need to and rebuild it.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question, Commissioner, because we're going to be coming back to the Commission with an additional request that would be broader in scope. But and we've been watching this wall. This is an area of very large landslide, very deep, large landslide that's been moving for many, many years. And so the region will be coming back with an additional request, but currently we need to fix this piece right away.
What, I'd say so.
So this is a first step, I guess.
Oh, okay. Well, that answered it. So I'm happy to make a motion. Mr. Chair.
Okay. There's a motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussions, questions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 3 is approved.
Item number 4, US 40 Vernal Drainage Project. This is a funding addition of $1.4 million of local funds from Vernal City. Location of the project through downtown Vernal. This project was always anticipating an additional $1.4 million from Vernal City. However, the timing when the funding would become available was unknown, and so that was also leaving the start date of the project also unknown. The money is now available from Vernal City, and the agreements have been executed between Vernal City and UDOT. It is anticipated that construction will begin in the fall of 2019.
Move for approval.
Second.
I'm glad we're doing this because I have a meeting next month in Vernal. I don't want to face the public.
It'll stop raining.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 4 is approved.
Just a comment on that. There are exhibits that show this. The reason why they're waiting until fall is they're waiting until the rain will stop and the soils will dry out before we begin this construction project. So that was a news report, as well as there's a agreement between UDOT and Vernal City as an exhibit on this item. Item number 5 is I-15 bridge deck repairs in Utah County. It's a funding addition, $300,000 of transportation solutions for Region 3. It's I-15 bridge deck repairs. There are 8 structures located here on the map, north of Payson and south of the core project. The bridge deck repairs in the Utah County project is currently funded at $500,000 of state bridge money. 8 structures are being repaired, and the current funding level is sufficient to repair the structures. However, more funding is needed to cover the traffic control during construction. The original estimate for this project did not include traffic control. So that is where the increase of our request is. Said our request is for a motion to approve the $300,000 to the I-15 bridge deck repairs in Utah County.
Second. That picture seems to suggest only 3 structures.
There's one farther north,
4.
up here at the top, and there's a northbound and southbound structure on each location.
I thought you get to 8.
That's how we get to here.
So when you talk about traffic control, would this include things like the stop flags, green and stop, where you've got to go to one lane, and so you've got to go one way and let it come the other way?
This work is on the freeway on I-15, and so this would be for worker protection and to close a lane of traffic. So it'd be mostly devices to channelize traffic and to protect workers.
Okay. Any further discussion on number 5? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 5 is approved.
Our next item in Region 4, the new pavement preservation projects. There's 4 projects listed here being funded out of the Transportation Solutions Program for Region 4. We'll run through, I'll show you the locations on the maps below. North of Gunnison to North Fayette, US 89 heading east of Kanab, SR 31 east of Fairview on Millard Flat, and SR 9 heading to the east entrance of Zion from Mount Carmel Junction. Due to the budget shortage caused by the increased snow and snow removal this past winter and spring, these routes are no longer able to be preserved through Region 4's chip seal program. Using the region's chip seal crews, these projects will allow Region 4 to maintain pavement preservation schedules for these segments. So essentially, instead of using our maintenance staff, we're going to be contracting out this work through their Transportation Solutions program.
Just a question on that road that goes out north of Gunnison. I haven't been down there in a while, but is there a game fence along there to keep the deer off that road? Seems like to me that's a major animal collision corridor with cars.
There currently is not, but that is an area that we've been looking at, trying to prioritize hotspots throughout the region.
Okay.
So you're asking for motion?
Yes.
Oh, I said no.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on item number 6. Any further discussions, concerns? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Number 6 is approved. You also going to present B and C?
I'll present B, and then Jared will present C. On our fact sheets, one thing I just wanted to note before we get started, there is an exhibit attachment on 9B that is an older version of this exhibit. I apologize that it was added or that got attached to this. The difference that you'll notice is back in April we received some highway infrastructure funds. We increased the traffic and safety by $200,000. This line here on the exhibit shows $3.85 million, and the transportation solutions of $21.05 million. We had moved $200,000 into the traffic and safety, and that's what our fact sheet up here shows. So there are two graphics. The totals of the construction line item is the same. However, we had moved $200,000. So on the fact sheet itself, that's what we're presenting and requesting approval from. As we discussed yesterday in our staff update, this money is the state money for this current year that will become available in July 1st. And our request for today is to approve the amendment of the state-funded programs into our current STIP.
So moved.
Second.
So state the motion again, please clarify exactly what you're asking.
Our request is the approval to add the state-funded programs. And I just went through an update.
So this is state money from the transportation fund, not the transportation investment fund, which I acted on last year.
Right. Thank you, Carlos. It is the construction management line item of the transportation fund. And our request, again, is the approval to add the state-funded programs to the fiscal year 2019-2024 STEP as detailed.
Without explanation, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number B is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. welcome back.
Thank you. Let's see here. So we're here to review the Aviation Capital Improvement Program, or the Airport Capital Improvement Program, sorry. I do have some news. We're going to start off what you're going to review today and what you will approve in June is already different. Wednesday morning, the FAA announced that Bryce Canyon will be getting $5 million supplemental funding. Moab will be getting $4.75 million in supplemental funding, and Roosevelt will be getting $9 million in supplemental funding. That's an immediate impact of a savings of $434,227 of state funding in projects to those airports.
Eric, will you explain why?
Yes, sir. So my team put in applications for the supplemental funding as it was authorized in the transportation bill by the U.S. Congress. We put in several applications. Bryce was included. They're getting a new runway, a new taxiway, new lighting, and a new apron. Roosevelt is almost getting an entirely new airport. They're also getting a new runway, new taxiway, new apron, and a fence. And then Moab is actually getting a new taxiway. They're moving the taxiway from one side of the runway to the other in order to fit the larger jets that are now flying in there.
Right.
Is that a good explanation? Does that fit? Okay.
Now, is that work going to be done this year?
That work will be, most of it's already started. Some of the work is already started. Bryce Canyon's already out for bids, and that money has been awarded.
Who reviews those bids? Do we have any to that review?
The aeronautics, we review the bids that were part of the old ACIP, and then we review the bids. It goes out, engineer of record put out the bids, and then we award the money. The bids are out. A shovel hasn't touched the dirt yet, but the bids are out, so we can still, the federal money goes straight to it. Goes straight to making those payments. So that is fully funded, no match needed, so we will be saving money on that. My team is actually also working with the airport's district office. The $434,000 is the immediate impact. We're also working to lump a few other projects together. So we're hoping for an additional $1.1 million in state fund savings through the supplemental program. So that's good news. That's great news. It's about $18 million. Our proportional amount for the state of Utah was $15 million. So I think my team did a great job in getting an additional amount beyond our proportion from the supplemental program. So now we'll go line by line through each airport each year. No, we won't. We will not go line by line. You've got a lot of numbers in front of you. Let me break it down. The next 5-year ACIP represents 171 projects at all 46 airports for a total of $238 million over the next 5 years. That breaks down into $192 million federal dollars, $35.5 million local dollars, and $10.1 million state dollars. So when I've got a couple slides, do you have the PowerPoint? It's just 2 slides. It's a 2-slide PowerPoint. Very, very brief. 2 slides. So just to visually depict what the numbers say, you'll see the past 5 years and what those look like. In year 2017, you see the spike of the $5 million the legislature gave us. And the 2019 spike was actually that the result from the Moab, from Cedar City, from the Logan projects that we completed. And I did want to share with you, I know we talked about Moab a lot, and I'm talking about it again today. Moab was struggling to get that 10,000 enplanement, which is why we rebuilt the runway, why we added a $1 million hard stand for aircraft. In the last 10 years, their highest year of commercial enplanements was 2014 at 6,708 passenger enplanements, commercial passengers. In the last 12 months, since we have completed those projects, 14,782. So the return on that investment has paid in dividends. We are seeing a lot more traffic through that airport, a lot more traffic. So to get back to our graphs, you'll see that the capital improvement program starts to drop off after 2019 really drastically. And that's intentional, and I want you to know that's intentional. As you go through the numbers and you see as the years go on, the number of projects decrease, the number of the dollars being spent decreases. We are currently doing our aviation development strategy, our statewide aviation development strategy. That project wraps up in the first quarter of 2021. So we're intentionally looking to collect that data to help prioritize those project decisions beyond 2021. 2019 is set, 2020 is set, but we're really waiting on that data to come in to prioritize what do we need to do across the state. So as the aviation development strategy brings us that data, we will produce projects from that data to say, okay, now we know what we really need to do. And if you'll go to the next slide, it's just again in 2017, there's that $5 million from the legislature. The red line is the federal projects, the green line is state projects. Now we are using, one thing I do want to boast a little bit about is we are using our state dollars to leverage local and federal dollars in a way that hasn't been done before. And we're seeing a lot of increase in the federal dollars because of that, just because of the way we think about how we're spending the money, how we're partnering two projects together, getting economies of scale on pavements, on fencing, on every project, and it's really benefiting the state. But again, you'll see some decreases up to 2021 as you review this because we're waiting on the aviation development strategy. With that, I will keep it very brief. Do we have any questions? I'm glad to answer any questions.
How often do you inspect airports in the States?
Right now, we do our what's called a 50-10 inspection every 3 years. That's the bare minimum that's allowed. So every airport gets a 50-10 inspection every 3 years. It is the bare minimum.
What do you look for in those inspections?
We look for pavement condition, based aircraft, how many operations. We look at the airport layout plan, what needs to happen. We're also analyzing, how many airports are using the airport. Is the airport meeting the standards it needs to meet to support that many aircraft? We also look at what we call the critical aircraft, which is a type of aircraft that Moab's a great example. Heber City's a great example. If you have heavier iron, heavier jets coming in, does the runway support the weight? Does the taxiway support the weight? Does the apron support the weight? Is there enough room to park them? So that's what we look at in those inspections.
Thank you.
What are the repercussions in St. George closing the airport from May through September?
They're not as bad as if we didn't close the airport from
Yeah,
May to
I
September.
know the problem.
We will transfer that traffic to Cedar City. It'll come back after St. George is reopened. And at that point, every pilot, every passenger is going to notice, hey, this runway is a lot smoother, because right now as you go across it, you can feel it. Yeah.
That was intentional design to give the people a bit of a...
Part of the problem.
I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna take that. And I'll tell you, Walt Disney actually built an airport at Disney World, and when you landed, you heard the tune, "When You Wish Upon a Star." That was designed into the pavement.
That was captured on. I missed this call. You should be an innovator.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So item number 10, we have corridor preservation, and we have Charles Romans present that.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Do you have the fund report? The first page. As usual, we'll start with a review of the Marta Dilbury Corridor Preservation financial situation. You can see a balance forward of $28,750,000. There is a land transfer, a sale of a house on West Davis Corridor that was completed recently, which will return some funds. Revenue of almost 1.3 million. I would point out the motor vehicle rental tax is a little more than we are used to seeing. I think that reflects a busy ski season, end of the season with a lot of great snow. Property purchases expenses of just under $100,000. The numbers add up, leaving a balance of just under 30.4 million. You can see that we have a number of acquisitions in process that have already been approved by the commission, totaling just over 28.1 million, which would leave a balance of just over 2.2 million. We have 3 items on the agenda today that, if approved, would leave a balance of, and there's a correction to be made here, the third item, the Powell residence, the appraisal, the 525 was put in as a placeholder. That was an estimate provided by the appraiser. He has finalized his appraisal. It will come in at $500,000, which we'll talk about in a moment. So if all 3 were approved today, the balance would be $25,000 higher than what is shown here. It would be 1.149077. So that's one small correction. That's part of how we're able to advance these items through the advisory council and not hold them up. The appraisers will give us those estimates and then finalize their reports for us before we arrive here at the commission. Are there any questions with respect to the fund balance?
That's a good outcome.
Yeah. We are, you'll see there's a little bit more money there than we saw last month. We have been working very hard. We have a plan in place to continue to return funds. So I hope in the next month or two to see a little bit healthier number than we have seen in the last few months. Diane is always busy. Okay. With that, Heather, where's the... which tab to go to? There it is. Thank you. Item number 10A is the Clymore residence in Eagle Mountain, 2311 East Bobcat Way. This is along SR 73, and it has an appraised value of $395,000. I believe, as usual, a picture is worth 1,000 words. You can see that the Clymore residence is pretty clearly under the future alignment of SR 73. One thing I would call your attention to is kind of just to the right of that proposed cul-de-sac, you will see their driveway and where it accesses Bobcat Way, which is under the frontage road. It would eliminate the access to their home. They would have no way to get in and out. That, I think it makes it much more clear why we're before the commission with this request. One other thing that I would scroll to the next page, you can see the corridor preservation work. The properties highlighted in orange are parcels we have already acquired for this future project. And you can see the Clymore property highlighted in kind of a purplish blue color there. Our request to the commission with respect to the Clymore residence would be to acquire this property at the appraised value of $395,000.
Move for approval.
Second.
So motion and a second on item number 8. Any further questions, concerns? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Approved.
Thank you, Commissioners. Item 10B is the Hunt residence along 1800 North in Sunset, 191 West, 1800 North. The property has appraised for $189,000. We heard from Nathan earlier about this project and its future plans. Here's a zoomed in picture of the proposed alignment and how it would impact this home owned by the Hunt family. And again, you can see on the next page that we have done a fair amount of preservation work along 1800 North already. This would be an additional a parcel that would facilitate that project along 1800 North. And our request to the commission would be to acquire the Hunt parcel at the appraised value of $189,000.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second, any further discussion? Going on, go ahead.
Once this going to undertake construction site?
So what I thought I heard earlier, and yeah,
So it's not funded, so
it
this.
is not funded,
So
but I
this
heard-
home we're just buying on this corridor preservation, they're going to be turned over to that rental Butch, going to rent it, put people in there?
Most likely, we'll have our property manager do an evaluation of the home. There are a few homes that we have purchased along this corridor that were in such rough condition that it would not have been economical to improve them enough to, particularly given where the land values are. So we would proceed with a demolition in that case to avoid some problems that come with vacant homes. We have done that, I think, on one home along this stretch. My understanding is this one we would likely turn it over to property management, but we take a good hard look at it. We get an estimate from corrections on what it would take to improve it and make it something we could rent, and then analyze the time that we would be able to rent it and see if we can get return on that investment, or if it's more economical to go ahead and demolish it.
Can you give me an idea of how many homes are in property management that are in rental right now?
I don't know the number of homes. We have 140 leases that we manage. Those are mostly vacant parcels that are rented for agricultural purposes. We work with property management firms. They handle the homes, so we're largely hands-off on the homes. I can find out the total number for you. I apologize, I don't have that.
I'm
off the top.
curious about the return on the money. Who reports that back to us?
We do monitor that. That's actually one of our performance measures.
That's what you saw, okay, at the top of that balance sheet there. Okay.
That's partly reflected here. We have on our
The market refunding? Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I really want to know.
Yeah, we have on our dashboard at an overall level, depending upon whether it's been acquired by a project or the corridor preservation fund, but the net effect of our rental and property management program is a return of roughly $2 million every year. It varies from year to year to the transportation fund.
They're reporting the eye of the sheriff's state. Thank you.
No, thank you, Commissioner.
Any other question? So all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Number B is approved.
Commissioners. And item 10C is an acquisition from the Powell family at 8376 Dynasty Way. This is in Cottonwood Heights along Wasatch Boulevard. As we discussed a moment ago, their home appraised for $500,000. I apologize, this is not the best map that we have. This project is in early phases, but you'll see the home here is outlined with a black outline. The yellow line here is where the line of sight would be needed for a future light at this Kings Hill Drive intersection. There are a number of different proposals along Wasatch Boulevard. Each and every one of those proposed alternative routes would impact this parcel. And for that reason, we would request that the commission approve the acquisition from the Powell family at $500,000.
I so moved.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Item number C, any further discussions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Number C is approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioners.
Thank you.
So we have item number 11, administrative rule review. Let's see who's going to do. Jared, are you coming back?
HB 200 passed and gave the Aeronautics Division authority to and responsibility to collect the aircraft registration fees. It also mandated that we create a rule for anyone who would like to request a different decision on registration fees. And I do want to take this moment to introduce Martin Shoup. He's a retired Air Force officer who came to us and has been our aircraft registration program manager. And so with your leave, I'd like to have him talk about the rule that he's worked so hard on.
Thank you, Jared, Commissioners, Directors, and Mr. Chairman. Good morning. So the Tax Commission had an avenue to appeal registration fees as we assess those for about 7,000 aircraft in Utah. That responsibility has now come over to the Division of Aeronautics. So we have a draft rule that allows that appeal process and request to go forward, and it's included in the attachment for your review. Take any questions if you have.
What was the main change? Excuse me. What was?
That was resident in tax code, and so we needed to adopt that as an administrative rule within the transportation community so that we have that capability.
Oh, okay, thank
And it's purely a formal request process. So it was designed in conjunction with the State Attorney General's office, Mr. Palmer.
How many aircraft did you say this?
Just under 7,000 for Utah, so generates just over $1.2 million. So pretty small compared to the other.
How many it is?
Every penny counts. Every penny counts.
Any other question? Thank you.
Question?
Welcome aboard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, item number B. Alan?
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to see you again. I just have a couple of updates. I have, this is as a result of House Bill 385 right-of-way equity amendments that was passed during this last legislative session. It affects both rules R930-7, which you have right in front of you for utility accommodation, and R930-8, which is the relocations of utilities during projects and talks about reimbursements. So the House bill changed the definition of a utility to include crude oil and petroleum products, and it also changed the reimbursement requirements for that. So as a result, we looked at both rules that affect utilities, and in this rule on R930-7, we provide a proper definition of utility facility, referencing back to Utah Code 54-329, which is the public utilities definition. And so that helps us, especially in permitting, so that we can continue to disallow those types of facilities longitudinally in our rights of way. It doesn't affect crossings for them, but it does say that they cannot obtain a permit for a longitudinal installation of a crude oil or petroleum line. We also took the opportunity to strengthen the maintenance responsibilities for facilities that are in our rights of way. So with that, that's the update on R930-7. If you have any questions on that one.
Any questions? How about number 8?
So R930-8, that's where we see the biggest impact, where we now have to reimburse crude oil and petroleum lines that are impacted by our projects at 50%. However, the House bill said that we have to do an evaluation of the relocation versus the cost to avoid them. So it's just a little nuance only for crude oil and petroleum. And so in that, we took the definition of a utility from the impacted rule, or excuse me, the impacted code 72.7.16. And that's all I have on that. It's very simple. Just
So
quickly
the
getting
cost
those.
of the relocation versus the reimbursement.
So the cost, it changed the cost of the relocation, and then you have to evaluate the cost to avoid the utility. So that's something we haven't done before. So if we were building a bridge and we were going to impact a crude oil petroleum line, and we have to evaluate the cost to relocate that line, but let's say we have to make the bridge longer, if we're going to avoid them, then the additional cost to avoid them, we evaluate that, and then we take the lesser of the two, and we split that 50-50.
Okay. Thank you. Any other question? Good job.
Great, thank you.
All right, that's all the items we have for today. Any other commission reports, anything?
I'd just like to say one more thing.
Please.
This is for the people here in the commission. I'm profoundly moved by the contribution in my mother's name. She died this last week, and we had the funeral, and the money that you've given will go towards disadvantaged children attending school. My parents gave a scholarship to that for years. And in lieu of flowers, thank you. It was most thoughtful. I'm sure she's surprised. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next commission meeting is June 27, 28. That will be Saratoga Springs. Any other items from the public?
Are we going to have to do something with Tyson's Foods moving into Saratoga Springs at the end of the road? Did you? I know.
I saw the article in the paper, so it's, I think one of the things you did today is what's preparing us for that, is that quarters preservation purchase along SR 73. So we've been working on that. We know that's going to have to be an upgraded major facility in the future. So
Boy, I saw that. I got in and saw that and went, okay, Charles and everybody, reason to get rid. But it's good news. So,
it's in a growing state. This is what we have.
I'm actually through.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
If I could add one other item. Today is Heather's birthday.
Well, son of a gun.
Happy birthday.
We're gonna sing it, no? We're not gonna sing
It'll be
it.
19.
We're gonna do it. Just join us, please. 1, 2, 3.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Heather. Happy birthday to you.
And then more. Pardon the voice. Thank you all. Thank you for being here and helping us. Thank you for your patience. Now I want that motion to adjourn.
I shall move.
Adjourn. Have a wonderful day.